Hi friends, I'm Day, your host, travel lover, deal finder, and storyteller. And this is Wander Every Day, the podcast where real talk meets real trips. Each week, I sit down with some of my favorite well-traveled friends to swap stories. We're diving in on where to stay, what to eat, how to spend your time and money, and how to enjoy exploring the world. Now, let's wander. Hi friends! Welcome back to Wander Every Day. This week, I'm so excited to share with you perhaps my favorite interview to date with my husband's cousin Francesca about her trip to Tanzania and Zanzibar. Her and her husband Max set out on a 6-day African safari that took them through the Serengeti to see wildebeest, lions, giraffes, and we're going to find out if they saw a kill. They also went to the Ngorongoro Crater and then ended their trip in Zanzibar at a beach resort. But before we dive into Francesca and Max's trip, let's set the scene. Tanzania is one of the most iconic locations in East Africa, home to sweeping savannas, the legendary Serengeti, Mount Kilimanjaro, and vibrant local culture. It's where you go if you want to catch the Great Migration, a hot air balloon ride over the Serengeti during sunrise, or if you want to spot the Big Five on a safari. The Big Five are the 5 most iconic animals to spot during an African safari. This includes lions, leopards, elephants, rhinos, and Cape buffalo. Originally, these animals were considered the most dangerous animals to hunt by foot. But now, spotting all 5 on a safari is on a bucket list for many African safari travelers. And yes, it's as thrilling as it sounds. And you'll hear about that today. Just off the mainland of Tanzania lies Zanzibar, a dreamy island paradise with white beaches, turquoise waters, and the rich cultural fusion of Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. You've got spice tours, snorkeling, exploring Stonetown, and the most incredible sunsets you've possibly seen since Greece. If going on an African safari has always been something on your bucket list, stay tuned, because you're going to hear all about how to plan a trip, where to go, when to go, and what to expect on a Serengeti African safari, as well as a nice, calming, relaxing side trip to the beautiful island of Zanzibar. And now it's time to speak with Francesca about her and her husband Max's trip to Tanzania, where they went on the most epic African safari. And then we'll hear about their beautiful beachy vacation to Zanzibar. Today's guest is my husband's cousin, and truly one of the most effortlessly adventurous people I know, Francesca. She's the kind of traveler who you see on socials hiking the Inca Trail one day, then exploring the Sahara Desert the next. She regularly skis through the Rockies, road tripped across France for her honeymoon, and explored everywhere from Guatemala to Osaka. And when she's not out exploring the world, well, you can find Francesca curled up with a crossword puzzle at the cottage, or nerding out as a civil engineer by day and the president of the Toronto Railway Club by night. Yes, that's a thing. Let's get into our latest adventure, a bucket list trip through Tanzania and Zanzibar. Francesca, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you. And before we dive into your trip, there's something that we have to talk about, and you might know what it is.
Oh.
So, 2 weeks ago, I am sitting on my couch and very aware that you're supposed to be leaving for Corsica. And I get this very cryptic message from your husband, Max, that says, Daytona, I think you might have just gotten some great content for the podcast. You should ask Francesca about it. And I was like, okay, what is this? So I messaged you. Why don't you tell us the story of what happened on your way to Corsica?
Yes. So 2 weeks ago, we went to Corsica just for a week trip. It was fabulous. Subject for another pod, perhaps. So we show up to the airport, and we had booked this trip 3 weeks before we left. So it was, pretty rushed in its planning, but I had booked everything 3 weeks before. We get to the airport and show up to get on our flight, get to the check-in desk. The person takes our passports, scans mine, scans my husband's, and then kind of has this puzzled look and goes to get someone else. And then comes back, and another gentleman informed us that because my husband's passport was expiring at the end of August, and it was May 30th, and our return date was in June. Apparently, which is a fun fact that we didn't know, your passport has to be valid for a minimum of 3 months if you're traveling to the EU. So the guy basically said, you can't go. Well, he turned to me and said, you can go, but turns to Max and says, you can't go. You have to get a new passport. So he tells him, he was really nice about it, and he tells him, there's a passport office. We're in Toronto. There's a passport office in Mississauga. They can probably do an emergency passport same day. It's 2:30 p.m. and the passport office closes at 4.
What time was your flight?
Our flight was at 4.
Oh my gosh.
So there was no world in which we were going to make that flight. Yeah, not going to happen. So... but it was a flight, we had a layover in Montreal. So it was Toronto to Montreal at 4, and then our flight to Paris was at 7:30 p.m. And then we had another flight to Corsica. It's kind of a pain to get there. But anyway, so my husband gets in a cab, goes to the passport office. I'm at the airport. I literally look like Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the page of all the writing and the arrows, and because I'm trying to figure out if there's an alternative flight arrangement that I can make, and calling the airline to see if they can rebook us and blah blah blah. He has like a miraculous experience at the Passport Canada office. Like, for every government service that we hate on, I think that was insanely incredible that he managed to get this passport so quickly. So they pull him to the front of the line because he shows up with his luggage also. So very obviously coming from the airport. And they ask him, when's your flight? And he goes, here's my boarding pass. It leaves in an hour. And they're like, get to the front of the line, go. So they bring him to the front of the line. He's filling out the paperwork as he's getting his photo taken. Like, he's calling me for references. I'm calling my friends being like, hey, I need a reference because Max needs an emergency passport. Are you by your phone? They moved mountains for him. They managed to get the passport issued within 40 minutes. And then he was back at the airport by 4:15.
That is crazy.
I know, right?
The most efficient Government of Canada service I've ever even heard of.
I've never heard of such an efficient. Yeah, it doesn't exist.
Were you able to catch your 7:30 flight from Montreal? Like, did you fly to Montreal? Oh, no. Okay.
We had to completely rebook a new ticket to direct from Toronto to Paris, but we rebooked a brand new ticket. And
that same day.
But yeah, literally booked a flight for 8:30 that night at 4:30.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Why did you decide to go to Corsica last minute? Did you already know you were going to go away and then you just chose that place? Or like, because 3 weeks is a pretty quick turnaround to plan a trip to Europe.
Yeah, we knew that we wanted to go away late May, early June. We knew we wanted to go to Europe. There were a few options that I had been researching a little bit before we booked it. It was on my radar and kind of on my list of places to go. My parents had gone in the 80s and loved it and always spoke super highly of it. So it was just always on my list. And in the end, when we got there, it was spectacular. It's a beautiful island. It's part of France. It's rugged. It's beautiful white sand beaches. It's mountains. Really quiet in June. Apparently their high season is only in July and August. So any time outside of that is not that busy.
Well, maybe we can talk about that trip one day because we did go to Corsica once on a cruise and we went in May and we went in 2019. It was the coldest May in Europe in like record. It was like 5 degrees. It was freezing and I didn't pack for it. So we didn't enjoy it as much, but your parents have always been like, I've heard them talk about their Corsica trip too.
Yeah, they love it. They have a giant coffee table book that says Corsica. And I've looked at this coffee table book for my entire life and thought, that's a place to go to.
Speaking of places to go to, you've been to so many places. How do you decide on where you're going to go in general? Like as a trip planner, what drives or motivates you to travel to certain destinations?
I'm not going to lie, I have kind of a running list. It's a very long list, but I've had a list for many years of just places that I've always wanted to go. So sometimes if I'm thinking about planning a trip, I'll kind of look back at that list and pick something based off of that. Sometimes it's other circumstances that might bring me somewhere. So, sometimes it's other people that might have been. And then once I see what they've done or heard about what they've done, I think, oh, okay, that would be a great place to go.
I feel like the Tanzania Zanzibar trip is one of those things, though, that I haven't seen a lot of my friends do. Much of my travel is guided by influence from other people. So, what influenced you and Max to go on your African trip?
So I have to say, I give all credit to Max because he was the one who had brought it up a few years before we went. We went in 2022. He had brought it up a few years before saying, yeah, I've always wanted to do an African safari. I have to say, it wasn't on my radar. It was not on my list. It was not on my radar. To your point, I always thought that an African safari was something that you did when you were retired. I always thought that it was more cost prohibitive. And so it was just something that was out of reach. And I had been to Africa before. I'd been to Egypt. I'd been to Morocco, so more northern Africa. And South Africa was on my list, but Tanzania, not at all. So when he said it, I thought like, okay, maybe we can think about that. And I hadn't really done much research into it. Our aunt, Terry, and Uncle Pierre had been a few years before that. And so I had heard, some of their stories and I knew a little bit about their trip. And then kind of just timing of life, it really worked out that we were at a point where we weren't quite as financially committed. We hadn't bought a house. And we, were kind of in this period of, okay, well, we could maybe afford to go and we could afford to do the time. So why not do it now instead of waiting until we're retired? Because it was kind of like, do it now or do it when we're 60. So yeah, we made the decision to go in the winter, and I had started doing some research in like March, April for a trip that fall in September.
Is that the most common time to do this type of trip? Like, is September, October a good time to go to Tanzania?
It is considered kind of a little bit of low season. So it's on the cusp. We went early September. A lot of the safari timing is around the Great Migration. So there's a huge, phenomenon where all of these animals basically migrate from central Serengeti and up towards North Serengeti and into Kenya, and then back down through the Masai Mara Park in Kenya, and then back into the Serengeti. And they do this kind of big loop. The big thing that a lot of people want to catch on safari is the wildebeest running the river and crossing the Mara River, which is kind of on the border with Kenya and Tanzania. The peak timing of that is late July, early August. So that's peak time. So July and August are super popular times to go. And then September is, you still have an opportunity to maybe catch some of the remaining migration across the river. Once you're into October, it starts to get into rainy season. So less popular through the winter, through October all the way into the spring.
I'm assuming Tanzania is in the southern hemisphere.
Ooh, no.
Is it technically above the equator?
I don't think so.
I'm trying to figure out if it's going to be hot at that time of year. Like, is it, I mean, I imagine it's hot all the time, but like,
yeah,
is it a little less hot or is it super, super hot because you're in July at the equator, even September?
It's an interesting climate because it's desert kind of climate. So very cool in the morning, hot in the peak of the day. But even when we were there in September, it wasn't 40 degrees Celsius. It was, 20, 21, not super, super hot. But I think it's very heavily moderated by the desert and the grassy plains and stuff like that. So for that time of year, it wasn't too bad.
Is there anything specific you have to do to prepare for a trip to Tanzania and Zanzibar that you don't typically have to do for perhaps like European vacations or like traveling within North America? I'm kind of alluding to like immunizations, or do you need a visa, that type of thing?
The biggest thing is immunizations. It's similar to traveling to, I would say, South America, Central America, Southeast Asia, those typical kind of shots that you would need to get boosters for. We were also given malaria pills, if I'm not wrong. Although the malaria risk, I think, is very, very low because it's not forested. I think that was kind of more of a precaution. I know there's safaris in Rwanda and stuff like that to see the gorillas, and that would be way more of a malaria zone than Tanzania in particular. And then there was a visa that we had to pay for in advance, but it wasn't It wasn't as intense as going to the embassy and getting a visa kind of thing. It was more of just a payment. They just collected money.
Well, they just want their money.
They just wanted money. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the day budget travel scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is absolute cheapest accommodations, only street food, minimal to no paid activities, and 10 is absolute luxury, no budget, 4 seasons travel, where would you rate yourself as a traveler?
Oh, myself. I would say really, real middle of the pack. I used to be 1, budget, staying in hostels where there's cockroaches in the shower. No joke, that's a real experience. So used to do that. I've graduated, I've matured, and I'm older now and wiser, and I've recognized that cockroaches are not really a great thing to have in your shower. So now I've put the range, but not luxury. We're not over the top. I don't find value. There's a certain thresholds of accommodations where I just don't find the value. It's lovely, but you're only sleeping there.
Mm-hmm. So you put yourself in like a 5, like
Yeah.
4, 5, 6
Yeah, 4,
range?
5, 6. Depends
Okay.
on.
I think it depends on the trip too. Sometimes
Yes.
nicer trips you're going to do a 6, where other ones you're like, 4. I still want
Yeah.
to stay in a hotel and do nice things, but maybe not as nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about your general trip itinerary.
So for this trip, we had booked a 6-day safari to start. We flew with Ethiopian Airlines from Toronto to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and then to Mount Kilimanjaro Airport, which is in very close to the city of Arusha. It's right next to Mount Kilimanjaro, actually, which is a very cool thing to see when you land. And so we landed, we stayed just for the night, and then we started our safari, and it was a 6-day safari. We went into central Serengeti, and then we went into the northern part of Serengeti, so closer to the border with Kenya and the Mara River, again, to try and catch some of that migration. Then we spent a couple days up there, back into central Serengeti. Then we went and did a day in the Ngorongoro Crater, which is an old volcanic crater that has completely it's an old volcano that's collapsed into a crater. So all the animals that live in there are just trapped. Once they get in there, they can't get out. So it's
Oh
this
my gosh.
whole, microcosm of wildlife and ecosystem, and kind of all the same animals that you see everywhere else are all in this crater, which is very big. I describe it as little, but it's actually huge. So we did a day there, and then back into Arusha. And then we flew to Zanzibar at that point. So we flew to Stonetown and Zanzibar, and we stayed in the northwest part of Zanzibar, which is an area called Kendwa. And we were there for about a week. And then we went home. But we flew back through Dar es Salaam, which is the biggest city in Tanzania. Our flight back was again through Addis Ababa. We had a fueling stop in Dublin because the flight was so long. The flight was 18 hours long or something like that. So the fueling stop, we literally landed, didn't get off the plane. A fuel truck comes over, fills up the plane, and then you take off again.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yes.
What kind of plane was it? Like a 777?
Yeah.
It's okay if you don't know.
So it was a big plane. I will say this. So Ethiopian Airlines, when we first were looking into this trip, was not really what I would have picked as like airline of choice before I booked it. Because there had been some bad press before.
Was this right after their MAX 8 incident?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
I understand the bad press.
But actually, so I had been talking to my dad about it, who has been to Africa before for work. And I said, yeah, I don't know. We're looking into these flights, and Ethiopian Airlines is probably the best option. It's the most direct and cheapest and the best itinerary. And he goes, oh, yeah, Ethiopian is great. That's what everyone flies to get to Africa. Even if you're going to West Africa, that's the most efficient way to get there from Toronto, because you fly into Addis and then you take whatever connector to go elsewhere. So I thought, okay, well, reputable. And in the end, the planes were really nice. They're older, but they haven't done what every other airline has done, which is upgrade the cabin and cram as many seats as possible in there. So it's an older seat configuration, which means wider, leg room. It was luxurious. They still had the seat back TVs, but it was like paying for a plus seat on any other airline today was just regular economy. So it was really nice in that respect. I would definitely recommend.
I'm assuming you did a tour when you were on your safari. So,
Yeah.
how did you find the tour companies specifically that you chose?
Once we decided that we were going to go, I had spoken to our aunt, Terry, because I knew that she had gone a few years before. And I asked her for some tips. And I said, it's overwhelming to try and find a tour company. And, you want to find someone who's local. You don't necessarily want to deal with, at least this is my own take on it. I don't necessarily want to call up like G Adventures and try and get them to book me a safari. They're based in North America. What do they know about safaris? I don't know. So I thought it was a little bit overwhelming to try and find a company. So I asked her what her advice was, and she had said, try and find a local company. They had done their safari out of Kenya, so she didn't necessarily have any recommendations for me for starting out of Tanzania. So I literally went on Google Maps and I'm searching like tour companies
Oh
in
my
Arusha. Or then I'm like Google searching tour companies in Arusha because I knew that was our starting point. And not gonna lie, the results were pretty slim. What I then found out and came to learn once we were there is that a lot of the actual operators, they contract out to all these big agencies and booking groups and larger tour operators in Europe, in North America, and blah, blah, blah. So it is actually pretty hard to find a local company. I managed to find a couple and, sent in some inquiries, talked through itineraries with both of them and tried to get a sense of, how many days would we do and where would we go? And there's different options of how you can kind of put together the package. A lot of them, they'll offer private or group, but private and group are effectively the same price. There's not really a difference at all. And so we thought, okay, well, we'll just do private if it's the same. In the end, the company that we chose was way less expensive than the other company that I had been talking to, and their itinerary was a lot better as well and just kind of worked for what we wanted to see. So we went with them. Their name was Safari by Z or Safari by Z, depending on where you're from.
So, just the letter Z or Z.
Letter Z or Z. They were good. I would say like the service offering was really good. Safari by Z is jointly owned by a group in the UK and locals in Tanzania. So
Okay.
the UK ownership thought, we're British. We want the safari vehicles to be Land Rovers, like the kind you see in like Lara Croft, not the suburban kind. So great. No problem. They're very nice vehicles. But we very quickly noticed that every other vehicle out there is a Toyota Land Runner. They've all got 2 million kilometers on them. They're abused, but they're operating great. Our vehicle did not survive day one.
1000K breaking down in the middle of the Serengeti.
We broke down at dusk in the Serengeti and managed to get someone to help us and get us restarted. And then broke down again, and it was pitch black night. The animals are hunting, and then had to get a rescue come pick us up and bring us back to some mechanic shop, and then get another vehicle to get us the next day. But not before we got the rescue vehicle to the mechanic shop. Get to the mechanic shop, they think they've fixed it. We get on the road again. At this point, pitch black. Driving in the dark, dirt roads. There's animals' eyes in the bushes, like it's freaky. I don't know how they know where they're going. And then the truck dies again. And so then people literally had to come pick us up and take our bags out and put them in another truck to take us to our camp for that night. Because it was like 8:30 or something at that point. It was dark. And our poor driver had just stayed with the truck all night.
By himself?
By himself. I mean, they're very
Oh
well
my
trained.
gosh.
I know, right?
Okay, but it just takes a few angry leopards or hungry hyenas.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Or lions.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
My
And
gosh.
that was not the first time. It also broke. Then we got a new truck. It broke down again, a new Land Rover. And then we got a third vehicle that was a Toyota.
She lasted the whole thing. Land Rover will not be a sponsor of the podcast.
No. Great drivers, like really great at knowing all the animals and knowing where to go and super professional. And like I will say this about the tour company itself, like the communication was amazing. The accommodations that we were in were really nice. We just went with midline. We didn't do anything fancy, and they were really, really nice places. So
What would you say is the price range for booking a safari? Let's just say like a week safari in Canadian dollars. What do you think people would be expecting to pay for that?
in Canadian dollars, so the catch is that everything is done in US, which is a real bummer these days because the
Yeah.
exchange rate is not good. I would say the range would be between like 3,500 and 4,500 per person
Okay.
for a week safari. And that's your accommodations, obviously the vehicle, the guide, all of your food. And you eat really well. The food at these camps is actually really, really nice. And some transportation back from like they'll pick you up at the airport and things like that.
Remind me again where you started, like where you flew into, and it was Mount Kilimanjaro Airport.
Mount Kilimanjaro Airport, it's right next to the city of Arusha. Our starting point was really Arusha, and then we drove west to get to the Serengeti.
Did you actually spend any time in Arusha before you started your safari?
We did a night when we, like, right when we had got there, we landed, we stayed at a Sheraton in Arusha. They do not recommend that you go walk around. I don't think it's necessarily unsafe. I think it's just you're a foreigner and there is a lot of poverty in Tanzania in general.
So you
Yeah.
didn't spend much time in Arusha.
No.
You just kind of stayed at the hotel. And the
Yeah.
next day you started your safari.
Yeah.
So let's like go day by day about what you did during your safari or kind of like the highlights of each day.
So day one, we got picked up by our driver, and that was we had met the driver the day before because he picked us up at the airport, and had an opportunity to chat with him a little bit. And so he picked us up bright and early the next day, and then we started driving out to the Serengeti. So you go straight west out of Arusha and through, a lot of little small towns, which was really cool to see. Like I will say this, that it's unique. It's a different part of the world, and it is very cool to see. And then to get to the Serengeti, you actually kind of drive around the top of the Ngorongoro Crater. So we actually managed to stop at the top of the crater at one of the viewpoints and get like a really nice view of the entire crater and took some pictures and then continued on to get to Serengeti. Once you get to this point, the roads are no longer paved. And as our driver so kindly referenced it, it's called getting African massage because literally just like bouncing in the truck. Like it's all washboarded dirt roads. Your teeth are chattering the whole way. It's very, very bumpy. But this was also the point where we started to kind of see some of the wildlife. So we saw our first giraffe, and then we saw some zebras. And I'll preface with, I went into this trip with really low expectations about what animals we were going to see because I didn't want to set the bar too high and be disappointed. I didn't know what the season would bring. So I literally was like, I don't even know if I'm going to see a zebra. I don't know. I don't know. Could not. And then right out the gate, we're like zebras and giraffes. And anyway, it was really cool. And then we get into Serengeti Park, and then the real wildlife happens. So as soon as we get in the park, all the drivers have radios, and they're all talking to each other and saying like, oh, there's a lion over here, or there's cheetahs over here, or there's whatever. So we get into the park, and right away, he brings us to this area where there were a couple cheetahs that were just kind of walking through the grasses. And there were a few, I think there were 5 or 6 other safari trucks that were there. And so we're just there watching these cheetahs. And then we were watching them for a little bit. And then we go around the corner and there's a lion in the distance. And then he took us to a hippo pool, which was really hilarious. Hippos, very smelly, lots of farts.
I've also heard they're really dangerous.
Yeah, and apparently dangerous.
I've heard they're like one of the more dangerous of the animals because they just like attack you and they're so large.
Yeah, we were pretty close to them, to be honest. But you're in the truck at all times. Like, you're not allowed to get out. So, yeah, we were at the hippo pool for a little bit. And then we were driving around, saw lots of monkeys and other cool animals. And then at this point, because it's a pretty long drive in the beginning of the day, to get to Serengeti. So we were kind of there more for, it was like afternoon at this point. So the day was ending. This is also when our car troubles started. And you know the rest. We end up getting rescued, driving through the pitch black with eyes in
Scared.
the dark. At a few points, like the rescue driver, I call him rescue driver, the guy who picked us up had to like slam on the brakes because Gazelle was like walking across the road. And anyway, it was pretty wild. And then we went to our camp, so the camps, to describe them a little bit, they're basically like a tent camp, but it's not like your camping tent that's tiny and thin. It's almost like what in Canada we would call like yurts. So they're the big canvas walled tents with wooden floors. And so at all these camps, there's kind of a series of individual room tents that each have their own bathroom, and it's all canvas walls, which is hilarious for a bathroom, but anyway. And then there's kind of a main tent where they have like their kitchen, and then they'll have a little dining room area, maybe kind of a living space that you can hang out in, and that's pretty much it. And then sometimes they'll have like a little bit of an outdoor seating arrangement if during the day you want to sit outside for breakfast or something like that. So, and the food, as I was saying, is all really, really good there. They do an amazing job with the food. So we got there. We had missed regular dinner, but they saved us food and we had dinner at 9 p.m. And then we get escorted to our tent because you're not allowed to walk at night by yourself because the animals are out. So you get escorted to your tent by like a guy with a flashlight and a gun and then, settle in for the night. But the nighttime is so interesting because on I would say almost every night I was woken up in the middle of the night by some sort of animal sound. One night we heard like lions fighting. One night this camp in particular was close to a hippo pool. The hippos very vocal at night. They're just really going off. So we just heard that in the middle of the night. And then in the morning, we heard the sounds of hot air balloons in the morning because they all do sunrise tours. So we had woken up and went outside and there's hot air balloons just coming over our tent, which was really cool. But yeah, that was our first day. So it was already an adventure.
Do you stay in the same camp the entire duration of the safari? So are you in the same place?
No. So you do move around. We did one night at that camp, 2 nights at another camp, and then back to that camp on our 4th night. And then we were at another lodge for our 5th night. You do move around a lot because a lot of the tours and they do this by design, but there's different things going on in different parts of the park. So you end up kind of moving around a lot because you're in one area in one day, and then you're in another area another day. So our first night was in it's called like Seronera area, which is right in central Serengeti. And then the next day we drove north, so you do a lot of driving. You're in that truck all day driving 8 or 9 hours, maybe more.
How many people are in these camps at a time?
It ebbs and flows. And again, because people are kind of moving around a lot. So the first night that we were there at this particular camp, there were only maybe 2 other couples that were there. And they're not huge, right? Like the camps are in total maybe 6 to 8 tents. So they're not huge. They can't accommodate a huge crowd. Mm-hmm. The second night that we were at that particular camp, there was a big group there of Germans, and it was their last night of safari, so it was kind of a party, actually. It was pretty fun. And they had basically the rest of the camp. It was us and then all the Germans. But even at our other camp, there were only, a couple other couples that were there, so pretty quiet.
Do you feel safe in these tents? Because I'm sure it's a bit nerve-wracking hearing like the lions and the hippos. Like, are you actually able to sleep? Are you like sleeping with one eye open because you're afraid a lion's going to break into your tent?
So,
get you.
Okay, here's the thing. Malaria pills make you have crazy dreams. They are the most vivid dreams ever, ever, ever. You'll wake up and be like, I lived a day. I had all these conversations. I did this thing. So convincing. So there was one night in particular where I think it was real. I don't think this was the malaria pills, but a herd had made its way through our camp one night, and this was verified by the guards, and I'm convinced that one of them nudged our tent because I woke up and there was a rustle against the wall of the tent. And some noises. There was some noises. So yeah, I think they did kind of nudge. I felt safe the whole time. Like, it wasn't like, because also the people that escort you and the security guards, they're there all night. So they're kind of on watch and they guard the camp in a sense. So there's at least usually two that are patrolling to make sure that nothing happens. Not that anything really would. The animals just seem to be they don't care that you're there. They're like doing their thing.
I'm sure animals aren't stupid, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they know that people sleep in that camp every night and there's commotion and they probably want nothing to do with that,
Yeah,
to be
exactly. Like, they're
honest.
not going
Even
on.
like lions, they have bigger fish to fry,
They're trying to
easier
get food.
targets.
Yeah. They're trying to
You
just
and your Land Rover broken down in the middle of the night, easier target. Okay, so you wake up on day 2.
yeah.
What did you do the second day?
So the second day, then we started to drive north. So that was, I think in total, it was like a 3-hour drive to get to the north. Of course, day 2, we ran into another vehicle issue. This was vehicle number 2, vehicle issue number 2. We stopped in, because you kind of come out of the park a little bit and then go back in. So when we went out of the park, stopped for gas, second truck died. So then that's when third truck, Toyota, came to get us. So, that added some time to the trip. But, and the Toyota, as much as it was reliable, was driven by a safari guide. They were on backup reserve at this point, with the drivers. So it wasn't a Safari by Zed driver. It was like some other company from the town. We asked him how long he's been doing this, and he said 2 months. So he had no experience and really nothing. He didn't even have a radio. He's like, we get back into the North Serengeti, back into the park. He's like waving people down and rolling down the window to ask them if there's any animals nearby because he can't communicate on the radio. Like, everyone else has a radio and this guy does not have a radio. So we're just pulling over, asking random people, hey, have you seen anything cool? And going on some goose chase. Thankfully, it's like wildlife aplenty. There's tons. And day 2 is when we saw like more giraffes and baby giraffes and tons more zebra. And then once we get into the north, the landscape just changed completely. So in the south, it was in central, it was very dry and like, yellow grasses, like dry grassy landscape. And then once we get into the north part of the park, everything's green. It's green fields. Everything's much more lush. So there's fields of green grass everywhere and tons of wildebeest. Just fields as far as the eye can see of these wildebeest. Ugly animals. They don't look nice. They're disgusting. Look them up.
Is Puma a wildebeest? Like from Timon
He's a
and Pumbaa?
warthog.
Smaller than a wildebeest.
Yes. We did see some of those, but yes. Anyway, that day we had just driven around and seen a lot of wildebeest and that kind of stuff. And again, because we had done a lot of driving in the morning and had our second truck breakdown, we weren't safariing for too long. It was only a couple hours. And then we went to our second camp. So the first camp was called Baobab Camp, which is a type of tree. And then the second camp was called Acacia, which is also a type of tree. So they really like the trees. Acacia was a really nice camp, honestly. The room in this one in particular was really cool. Like, again, it's a tent, so you're not expecting much. And the first room was like, yeah, okay, it's pretty whatever. It's a bed and a wooden floor. This one it was a 4-poster bed with the nice mosquito net, and the bathroom was all big. And then we tried our first bucket shower. So the bucket shower is you radio them from your room. Like, if you call from a hotel room, you radio them and say, I'm going to take a shower. And they'll come over and they stand like outside of the tent and go like, hello, okay, you ready for your shower? And you're like, yeah, okay, like I'm getting ready. And there's a bucket outside of the tent that has like a gravity fed hose that goes to a shower head inside the tent. And so they'll stand outside and they pour in a bucket of water. And so then when you turn on the tap, like, that's your water. That's your bucket of water. And they're like, yeah. So it's about, a 2-minute shower or I think it's a 5-minute shower or whatever. So you got to go quick. Can't really lounge. Washing hair, maybe not. I decided I was not going to deal with washing my hair because that would take too long. So I was like, okay, no problem. They do the bucket and then they go, is the temperature okay? And you have to go, yes, in the shower. Yes, and if it's not, then they'll put in they'll mix. They'll put like a little cold, or they'll put in a little more hot. They'll adjust the temperature for
This
you.
is very manual, the shower.
Very manual shower, and then you can take your shower. So it was an experience, but it was nice. It was cool. Yeah, so the rooms there were really good, and the food at this camp in particular was really, really good. It's lots of like rice and meats, but yeah, it was just seasoned really nicely and super tasty.
Is that in general kind of what you're eating at all the camps? Like a mix of like meat and rice type dishes?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a lot more of like stewed meats. So they'll do beef, not a lot of chicken, but mostly beef, I would say, and mostly kind of stewed with rice.
What kind of things would you eat for breakfast?
Sometimes they would have like oatmeal, or they would do at the Acacia camp, they had a guy doing an omelet station, which was so nice. And then he was making pancakes and crepes and stuff. So that chef was really good in particular. But it was a range. It would be like fruit and oatmeal, or they would go all out and have some sort of omelet bar like this one.
What would you guys do during the day for lunch?
For lunch, they would do a little packed lunch. So they would have a little brown bag lunch for you that the camp would make, but they'll give you like a sandwich, a couple apples, they give you like a juice box, some other snacky thing, but it's pretty good. It's a good amount of food that they'll pack you with.
You are in Africa, so you can only assume that you're drinking good coffee,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes. Oh, and I do have a story about good coffee in at the end of our safari. Yeah.
Okay, we'll
Awesome.
get there then.
Yes. So when we had got to this camp, this was also the place where we had decided that we were going to do they call it balloon safari. So the hot air balloon trip. And this was something that like our aunt had said, it's expensive, but it's 100% worth it. Like just spend the money. You won't regret it. That was, I think, $500 US, which in today's Canadian dollars is pretty expensive per person. So it was $750 per person, roughly $700 per
It's
person.
okay if this trip was a 6 or a 7 on 10. We
Oh, on
understand.
expensiveness? This trip was a 10.
Okay.
Not accommodation wise, but just generally, I would say it is a more expensive trip. Maybe a 9, maybe a 10. But yes.
At least our expectations now are set, so people know.
Oh yeah, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. I will say that. The whole thing, I think, cost probably $13,000 for 2 people.
You know, I hear people all the time that spend that much money, though, just to go to like Italy for 2 weeks. And I'm like,
Well,
$13,000, what are you doing?
no joke. We went to France for our honeymoon a year later and for 2 weeks, and we still probably spent $9,000. So when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it is not that much more expensive to do the safari. Which is also why when I started looking into it, I thought, okay, maybe this actually isn't too bad. It's not as cost prohibitive as I had thought. Still expensive for sure. But
Right.
in my mind, I was like, this is a $25,000 vacation, but it definitely was not that. So
Okay, so the
Yeah.
hot air
So
balloon.
the hot air balloon, 10 out of 10 worth it. It's very cool. You wake up super early. I think we woke up at 4:30 a.m. or something to go. It's like dark out also. So, or just kind of the inklings of dawn. So actually, we did see a lot of animals on our way to the hot air balloon place because they're all kind of still on the hunt. And we saw a jackal. So we get to the hot air balloon place. At this point, it's lighter and they're filling up all the hot air balloons, which is super cool to watch. So we wait for them to kind of fill up, and there's a bunch of people that are there, like a bunch of different people from different camps. And they start to kind of section us off into different groups that we're going to go in 3 different balloons. So then we all get in. Before we get in, we do the quickest safety briefing of all safety briefings. They put a little seatbelt around you with a clip and go, clip yourself to the hot air balloon and listen to the hot air balloon driver or pilot. So I go into this hot air balloon, and it's the coolest feeling to lift off out of a hot air balloon. There's no thrust. All of a sudden, you're just rising. And that was, I like, for sure one of our top. We had like 2 top experiences. That was one of our top experiences. It was the coolest thing we had done. The pilots are all super experienced. Half of them are from Turkey, from Cappadocia. And they're going up and down, and they go right above the river, and there's crocodiles in the river. And we saw like a hippo running, and you just see everything from above. It's really, really beautiful. So we do our hot air balloon ride. It was pretty long, to be honest. It was at like an hour, I'd say, at least an hour, maybe longer. And then we land, and once we land, which landing is super funny, we had kind of caught, he's bringing it down, and it looks like the basket's going to stay upright, but they kind of prepare you for if the basket tips over, you have to like hold on in case you go sideways in the basket.
Part of the safety briefing?
That was part of the safety briefing. So then we ended up actually like kind of clipping this bush as we're landing. And then we managed to just do this like perfect gentle landing. We get out, and they have like a team that's kind of following the balloon. So the team shows up, and then we find out that we're in Kenya because we had just kind of drifted a little bit over the border, and we ended up on the Kenya side. So
Is that
I went
allowed?
to Kenya. I wasn't supposed to, but went to Kenya.
Did immigration know that you went to Kenya?
No, they weren't there.
So did you have to flow back?
No, then they picked us up. I think it's pretty loose. You're still in the
Okay.
Serengeti / Masai Mara park, so I think the border's pretty loose there. So yeah, they picked us up and then brought us to a little place where they had breakfast, and they had this little picnic breakfast set up in this clearing location. When we landed, the people that came to pick us up, they pop champagne and give everyone a glass of champagne, and they sing and do their dance. There's this song in Tanzania that they all sing. It's called like Jambawana. So they all sing the Jambawana song. It's a lot of fun. It's like a whole little celebration that you did your hot air balloon ride and that you're in Kenya, I guess. Then our actual driver picked us up, and at this point, I mean, it's still super early in the day. So then we did a full day of safari and just kind of drove around, and we tried to see a river crossing of the wildebeest. They were milling about, but none of them were motivated enough to cross. So it's a game of patience. You kind of sit there for a while and watch and go, maybe.
Why is the river crossing so cool?
It's thousands and thousands of wildebeest that all run in a pack down a super steep embankment across this river, and they're all kind of like jumping across the river and half swimming. And then this whole pack like comes out on the other side, and it's like a stampede of wildebeest. What people are really trying to see is the crocodiles in the water try and eat the wildebeest. And so if you see a crocodile catch a wildebeest, that's like the epitome of safari. That's what everyone wants to see. That and a kill. If you see an animal kill another animal, that's like happens very rarely.
The holy grail of safariing.
That's the holy grail of safari. That's what everyone wants to see as a kill. So yeah, we waited a little bit for our wildebeest crossing. Didn't happen. And then our driver had rolled down the window and asked someone where there were animals, and found out that there were some lions. Still with this guy who is very new. And so he catches a tip that there's some lions a ways out. So we go, and we're driving a ways out, and there's no other safari trucks. Whenever there's something, like all the trucks kind of go to one spot. And so you usually know if there's something going on, if there's like 4 or 5 trucks sitting somewhere. And especially for the wildebeest crossings, if there's like a whole horde of them, then that means maybe there's like a crossing about to happen. And so like a ton of trucks descend on one area. So we're driving a ways out. There's no one around. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we turn around because this does not feel like we're going to see anything. We go, and there's these 2 female lions that were just kind of hanging out in the grass. And our driver like drives right up next to them. I am from here to the wall behind me next to a lion. And you're just like kind of watching them out the window. And a lot of the vehicles have a pop-up roof. So we pop up the roof, and then we're standing in the truck and kind of looking out. And we just watched these 2 lions hang out and groom themselves. And it was really cool. It was cool to watch. And that was the first time we had seen a lion on our first date from a distance. So this was the first time we were really up close to them. So then at this point, it's raining pretty hard to the end of the day. So we go back to the camp. And because it had been raining for a few hours, the area, I guess, is super prone to flash flooding. So we're trying to cross a bridge to get back to our camp, and the bridge is overflowing. The river's overflowing, and there's probably this much water or more above the bridge. And so a bunch of trucks are all stopped on the one side going, okay, we're going to have to wait a couple hours for it to subside. And we thought, okay, I guess we'll just hang out. So we're hanging out. And then our new driver, who has 2 months of experience, decides that one truck goes for it. And he's like, I'm going to go for it. And we're like, I don't think this is a good idea. There's like crocodiles in the water.
We can't go down to a fourth car. We can't do the fourth car.
If we go in the water, like, what's gonna happen? The truck is so old. One of the doors doesn't even work properly. We would not be able to get out. And I'm convinced out of everyone in this truck that I'm the best swimmer there. So now I'm gonna have to help everyone escape the crocodiles if we wash away into the river. So he's like, no, I'm gonna do it. We're going across this bridge, and I feel the truck kind of moving and being pushed by the water because it's flowing fast over this bridge. And I'm holding onto my bag with my passport in it, going, this is all I need. This is all I need. This is all I need. We make it. We make it. All okay. But yeah, that was a little bit of a scary moment. Yeah. And then back to Acacia Camp.
The thing I love so much about this trip so far is it's so adventurous. It's like adventure after adventure after experience after experience. I feel like it's just, is it almost like overstimulating at times when there's just all these new, there seems like there's a lot going on this type of trip.
You know, there are some periods where you're just driving, and it's amazing how quickly you get used to and almost, for lack of a better word, tired of the animals that you're seeing everywhere. So by day 3, you're like, wildebeest, whatever.
I want to see a kill.
You know, you're like, zebra. You're like, where are the rhinos at? Where's the kills? Where's the lions? So it's amazing how quickly you get super jaded and don't think that zebras are cool anymore, even though zebras are really cool. But yeah, it's like a lot happening and not a lot happening all at the same time. I call day 4 patience is key. So day 4, we were leaving the North Serengeti, and we're like, this is our last chance to try and see a wildebeest crossing. So we decide that we're going to like kind of camp out and be super patient. And we sat for 3 hours. I'm not exaggerating, 3 hours, and waited for this crossing to happen. We're in probably like 2 and a bit hours in, and then all these trucks start leaving the spot where we were and going somewhere else. So we're like, okay, I guess we're going somewhere else. So we go follow all these other trucks, and that's where the real action was happening. And there's 100 trucks all lined up on the banks of this river, like waiting for this crossing. Finally, as soon as one wildebeest goes, the rest of them start to follow. So one of them goes, they all start to follow. This whole herd comes like across the river and comes up and through where all the trucks are. It was actually a really, really cool thing to see. It does take a really long time sometimes. And that's why a lot of people go in July and August, because it happens more frequently. So it's not as frequent if you go in September. And then we said, okay, we can leave North Serengeti now. We've seen the crossing. So we left and we went back down to Central. And this whole time, Max is going, I want to see elephants. And I've been to Thailand. And I was like, yeah, elephants, they're cool. But Max is going, I want to see these elephants. So we're on the road. We're not even in the park at this point. We're on the road in between the north and the central part of the park. And there's this herd of elephants. There's 16 elephants and all these babies and all of them just at the side of the road in this grassy fields, eating the leaves off the trees and whatever. And so we just stopped and watched them for a while and then kept going and made it back to the first camp that we were at, the Baobab camp. This is where we get back to the Range Rover and our driver number 2, Lamomo. So Lamomo meets up with us again, and we're like, yay, Lamomo! Been a couple.
Do you have a radio?
You have a radio. You have a nicer, bigger truck. It's clean. The doors work. This is amazing. Miracles of miracles. So for day 5 and 6, we had a nice truck again.
So in general, the North Serengeti is where you're seeing this wildebeest crossing primarily.
At that time of year.
At that time of year, because you said the Great Migration's in a circle, so I guess it'd be at different parts, different points of the year.
Yeah, and the rains kind of move, so that's really what drives the migration is water and where the rains are. So the rains are in the north part, and so that's where like it's grass and there's lots of good eating for all these omnivores and herbivores.
So
Yeah.
if you were in the north where all the grass was and you left, where are you going now?
So back to Central because you know who loves grass, dry grass for hunting is gazelle. And you know who loves gazelle? Lions and cheetahs and
Cool.
leopards. We're like, now for the big cats. We want to see the cats. On our, I guess this is day 5, we were, driving around and it's much flatter. It's less hilly than in North Serengeti. And we had come upon this whole group of lions, pride. I don't know if that's the right word. Pride of lions. And there were a bunch of cubs. They were so cute. There were a bunch of cubs that were kind of playing around. And actually, for the first time, we had seen a male lion with the mane, and there were tons of them there. And then we're driving out a little bit more, and we see this cheetah in the distance. And the cheetah is kind of following the road, but he's in the grass, and then he comes up a little bit on they're ant hills, but they're literally like giant. So they kind of perch up on them to get a good view, and then they go back down into the grass and keep going. So we were kind of trying to follow him a little bit. And then we get to this area. There's like no one around. It's just us. And then our guide was nice and he radioed and goes, oh, hey, there's a cheetah over here. So a couple other trucks came. And we decide at this point, we're kind of like watching this cheetah. And he comes up really close to the truck actually at one point. So we were able to take some really awesome pictures of it just like sitting there right next to the truck. And then we're kind of watching him a little bit and we decide, okay, we're going to eat our lunch. So we're eating our packed lunch. And then all of a sudden, the cheetah like crouches down and we're like, oh my God, get my phone out and start recording. And it's a miracle that I caught this. But the cheetah crouches down, starts to kind of go up the hill away from us. And then we notice that there's a small gazelle on like the crest of the hill. So it crouches down and then lunges and sprints towards this gazelle. The gazelle catches on. It's like, oh no. So there's now a chase. There's a chase. The cheetah is zigzagging and chasing this gazelle, and they're kind of going, and we think that we're going to lose them over the hill. And then they turn around and come right back towards where we are and come right zigzag down. And then the cheetah catches up with the gazelle, flips it on its back, bites it in the neck, and kills it.
Right in front of you?
So we saw the kill right in front of us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do gazelles normally hang out by themselves? Like, don't they normally hang out in a pack for
there
safety
were a
purposes?
couple. The others had scattered. They knew.
Oh, obviously. Why would a gazelle ever stand on the top of a hill? That just sounds like a dumb idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
By itself. I'm here for all the cheetahs of the land.
Hello.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was that your second highlight
That
of your
was
trip?
number one experience. Like,
Yeah.
that's number one with a bullet for sure. The hot air balloon. Oh, I don't know. The hot air balloon was really cool. Tide. Just, those were the two best experiences that we had and the coolest things to see.
Did you see any other kills, or was that your one and
That was
only?
it. Even our
that's pretty
guide
good.
was like, I only see this maybe twice a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
You won the safari lottery.
For real.
Was there any animals you didn't see that you wanted to see? Or did you see all of them?
That same day we saw very loosely, because these guys are super sneaky and they don't really come out a lot, but we saw the kind of half of the body and the tail of a leopard that was hiding up in a tree. And he had a kill that he had caught the night before. Like, he had like half a gazelle that was just hanging up in the tree with him, which you see a lot of that. Like, you see post. You see the meal. You don't see how it's made. Yeah, we had seen the leopard sort of. Not really full on. And we didn't end up seeing a rhino, which they're very rare. Obviously, they're going extinct. So the only real opportunity that we would have had to see a rhino would have been in Ngorongoro Crater. And we tried to find them, but we did not.
So was there anything else you did day 5 of your safari? Anything else you saw? I feel like that was probably like the big highlight.
That was it. Yeah. And again, at this point, we're like, it's day 5. And we knew that we had to go at this point out of the park. We were leaving Serengeti. And we're like, there's nothing really that's going to top that. So we we're like, okay, we're going to cruise around a little bit more, but let's just head out. We had seen the leopard and a couple other things, and then we thought, okay, let's head out. So we went then to a town that's just outside of the park that's kind of between Serengeti and Ngorongoro. It's called Karatu. And we went there and stayed at it's called Pamoja Africa Lodge. And this was more of a hotel. We weren't in the camps anymore. So I had my first real shower, got to wash my hair, and it was really nice actually. It was super cool, like kind of eco. They did their own farming and they grew their own coffee trees. And so we had a little tour of the property, and they had their banana trees and all their other fruit trees. And then at the end of the tour, we're walking around the property and they do this little demonstration where you get to make your own coffee. You like get there's all the beans. They show you how you shake up all the beans to get the shell off and get the inner bean. And then they roast it right there. So you kind of get to roast it live, and then you get to grind it and then make yourself a coffee. So we did a coffee from start to finish, beans and all.
So you're at this nice hotel, you stay there for the night. I'm assuming they provide dinner and stuff. I can't imagine there's like a big restaurant scene.
No, yeah, all of them are very self-sufficient. So they had a little dining room, and actually the lodge was really, really nice. The main lodge area, they had a huge like brick 2-story fireplace kind of thing in the middle, and it was really, really nice to stay there. And one of those places that it was all part of our safari, but if there was like any opportunity to stay there for 2 nights, I probably would have, because it was really, really cool.
So the final day.
Last day.
What did you guys do?
That was Ngorongoro Crater. In the morning, went down into the crater, and you literally go down like a steep hill. And it's one road that goes down and another one that goes up, because like there's no way you can do two-way traffic. So you go steep, steep, steep down. And in the crater was interesting. There's like a little bit of a lake, and there were flamingos. And that's where we saw the warthogs too, tons of warthogs, and a lot more of the like gazelle, and there's so many different types of gazelles also. I forgot to show this. So Terry gave me this book called East African
Oh my gosh.
Life. And she had gone in and checked all of the things that they had seen. And then when we went in, we also checked that we had seen them. So the book was actually kind of helpful because there's so many different types of gazelles and bush bucks and antelopes and all these types of things. Dik-diks is one of them. That's not a joke. That's literally their name.
What does a dik-dik look like?
It's this tiny little gazelle. It's like a chihuahua-sized gazelle. It's a mini gazelle.
Does it have an annoying bark too?
I didn't hear it bark. Didn't hear any barking. But yeah, so the book was helpful because there's so many different species that you just don't know. And the birds, all the birds. One of them is called a secretary bird because its lower half looks like black pants and its upper half is white. And so it looks like it's in a suit. And so they decided it was
a secretary.
Yeah, just weird. Lots of birds. We saw a really old lion. He was huge and his mane was huge, and he was a senior. He was like a 15-year-old lion. And lots of water buffalo in the park as well, or in that crater as well. And that's where we had got wind of maybe there was an area with a rhino. Went in there, no rhino. So the elusive rhino, did not see him.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the crater that you think is cool to mention?
It is really like its own little microclimate down there, which is really interesting. Generally, I would say it's just very neat because it's very big, but then when you do look in the distance, like there's just these huge walls of the crater. And because it's kind of its own little microclimate, sometimes from the top of the crater, the skies are clear and there's a great view. And that particular day, actually, there was almost like a cloud hanging over the crater. So the view was not great from the viewpoint. So it was good that we had stopped on our way in. So once we finished up in the crater, then we went back to Arusha and stayed another night at the same hotel. The first night that we had stayed was not included in our safari, but the last night in Arusha was included in our safari. So we booked the same hotel, because we knew what the last night was going to be. But that one was included as part of our package. So we went back to the Sheraton in Arusha, and then we had arranged for the same company and driver to come pick us up in the morning and take us to the local Arusha airport for our flight to Zanzibar. There's two local airlines in Tanzania. I can't remember the name of the other one, but the one we booked was Precision Air. It is what it is. It's a small airline. The local Arusha airport is very similar to, I would say, my local airport experience in Belize, but it's like open air. Like the check-in area is just a giant tent. Like almost like, at a music festival or something, how they have like a bigger tent, but not that tall. But yeah, that type of structure was the airport. That was the airport. So you go through security, and then you make it through security, and the waiting area is another tent that's there's just the runway. Like you're just open air to the runway. You could walk right out onto the runway if you wanted to. There's nothing stopping you besides.
I'm assuming this is a small plane then, because you're not going to have like 300 people waiting for a big double wide body airplane. Okay.
It's fairly large size. It was equivalent of maybe a Dash 8 or something. The stuff they fly with like Toronto to Montreal. So it's a propeller. Yeah. And then in the waiting area, you're just kind of hanging out. And then there's someone that's like, okay, we're doing the flight to Stonetown. So yeah.
So how long's the flight from Arusha to Stonetown?
It wasn't that long. I want to say an hour and a half maybe. Because Arusha's kind of north central of Tanzania, and Zanzibar and Stonetown's at the very south end of Zanzibar, and it's kind of more towards the south of Tanzania, very close to Dar es Salaam, which is the biggest city in Tanzania. So our flight from Stonetown to Dar was 30 minutes. It was like a little puddle jump just over the water to get there. But yeah, it was a pretty easy flight, no issues. And then we landed in Stonetown and the roads were paved. So we
alas, no more African massages.
African massage.
Great. The back must have been loving the paved roads.
It was luxurious. And right away we noticed kind of the differences with Zanzibar. So it is 99% Muslim, whereas mainland Tanzania is not. It's more kind of indigenous religions and some Christianity, but not like there's not a lot of Muslim on mainland Tanzania. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting, like right away seeing that difference in just like, there's mosques everywhere and like things that we hadn't been seeing in the mainland. We had someone from the hotel come pick us up, so we'd arranged for a transfer. So we went about 2 hours north to Kendwa, and we stayed at the called Kendwa Beach Resort. Not to be confused with Kendwa Rocks, but they're all Kendwa something up there. And that's kind of an area where there's a lot of resorts. So there's different areas that you could kind of stay in Zanzibar. Kendwa is where most of the resorts are, and more of the beaches that you would think of in Zanzibar, that is kind of the area that you're thinking of is Kendwa. There's a ton of the East Coast is much more rugged and lots of windsurfing and stuff like that, but far less populated, so not as popular with, resorts. And we thought, okay, well, we're going to be here for 5 days. Let's splurge and go here. I say splurge with a face because the resort that we booked was only $200 a night. It wasn't that expensive. So we splurged and stayed at Kendwa Beach Resort. And it's so funny. 2 weeks before we had gone, we got an email saying there's been kind of a last minute change and we've had this tour group booked at the resort. And so just wanted to let you know there's going to be this tour group that will be there at the same time as you if you want to rebook your hotel. And I'm like, it's 2 weeks before. I'm not rebooking the hotel. Like, what? Whatever. And what last minute tour group shows up? But anyway, we show up at the hotel. All the signage at this hotel is in Italian. And I was like, what's going on? So
oh no.
As it turns out, this resort, and this is like a super common thing in Kendwa, is all of these kind of larger tour companies in Italy and France and Germany and whatever, they have these exclusive arrangements with certain hotels where they exclusively send their tour groups. But they not just send their tour groups there, they send in the chefs for the buffet, and they have all of the beach programming is run by like that tour operator. So we're at this resort in Zanzibar, and there's Italian music on the beach and Italian beach games.
Prosciutto and Chianti wine, and you're like, where am I?
All the signs are in Italian. The Maasai warrior guards that kind of stood at the beach to prevent the peddlers from coming in, they spoke Italian. So I'm sitting there going, this is not last minute. This is like a long-term deal that you guys have with this Italian tour group. Why are you emailing 2 weeks before going, oh, we didn't know?
Shocker. My gosh. So in general, if you were not going on a tour group, what kind of tourists typically go to Kendwa?
It's kind of all over. It's a lot of people who had just done safaris. So it's very popular to do like a week safari and then a week in Zanzibar. And even when I was researching different tour packages and corresponding with these tour companies, a lot of them would offer, and you can tack on, 4 days in Zanzibar and we'll put you at whatever resort. So it's a lot of that kind of crowd. It's the same people that would have been on safari. But because there's all these particular deals with these tour operators, there were a lot of Italians and a lot of French, which was really interesting. And you could tell which resort was which, because if you would go down to the beach, go to a different resort, all the signage would be in French. And then you'd go to the next resort and they'd be in Italian. There was, I think, one that was Spanish, but yeah, they all cater to these European crowds.
What kind of things do you do in Zanzibar? You're obviously at a beach resort, so I'm assuming you're spending a lot of time at the beach.
We basically, we knew that we wanted to spend a bunch of time at the beach. We did one day where we went on a day trip back down to Stonetown and did a tour of Stonetown and the old historic part, which is where Freddie Mercury was born. Fun fact. So we went down to Stonetown, which I have to say, it was pretty medium. We get down there, like we had a shuttle or something bring us down. And then we get out and there was a guide who met us and he was not super well versed in the history of Stonetown. He kind of knew a little bit, but Max, and Max knows his history and wants to know everything about the history of the town and the island. Very clearly, it did not translate to me because I don't even know what Max is going to watch this and go, how do you not know the history of Zanzibar? It was interesting to see, but it's basically just you're kind of walking around an older African city and all of the things that there's markets and kind of narrow streets and stuff like that. So it was cool to kind of get a feel for it. And it did feel pretty safe to walk around because I think there are a lot of tourists that will be going down into this old part of Stonetown. There are a bunch of restaurants and stuff like that. I had read a few blogs of people who had actually spent time in Stonetown and had stayed there. I personally would not have done that. I think doing the day trip was good enough and I saw it and I wouldn't stay there for any extended period of time. But the really cool part of the tour was we stopped at a spice farm. So Zanzibar is really famous for their spices. And at this farm, they had all the different trees and shrubs and different kinds of bushes and things like that where they make spices from. So the coolest one being cinnamon. Did you know cinnamon comes from a tree?
No,
It's
I did not.
The bark of a tree.
Of a cinnamon tree?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we just walk up to this tree and he goes, okay, and he
News
cuts
to
a
me.
piece off of the tree and then he gives it to us and goes, chew this. And we're like, oh, okay, chew the bark. So we chew it and it's cinnamon and that's how they make it.
If cinnamon is something that comes from Zanzibar, do you find there was cinnamon integrated into a lot of the food when you were eating food on Zanzibar?
Not necessarily. But I will say that everything was well spiced. Everything was very flavorful.
I know Zanzibar and maybe Tanzania as well are known for their spices, in particular. Are there any other primary spices that you tried there?
They had little, for peppercorns. Those came from a little shrub. Oh, nutmeg was the other one, which was kind of cool to see them.
Also a tree?
Nuts. Yeah.
Nutmeg tree.
That one was cool. Nutmeg tree. But yeah, everything was just very flavorful. So I feel like they used it in the cooking a lot. It wasn't necessarily like there was any one particular spice, but it was all very flavorful.
You talked about how Zanzibar was predominantly Muslim. When you
Mhm.
were in Stonetown, is it more like progressive Muslim or are
Um,
like I'm assuming you're saying mosques? Are you allowed to drink on the streets there? Is alcohol served? No.
no. It's very much like you do have to respect the culture and in the way that you dress. Like again, I've had this experience in both Egypt and Morocco. Like this is scandalous to be wearing a t-shirt with arms. So like longer sleeves is better, pants is better. Generally, I would say, I think when I was like that day in particular, I think I was wearing a t-shirt like this and pants, and it was fine. And I think in Old Stonetown in particular, in that historic area, they are more familiar with and used to tourists walking around. So it's not like anything bad would happen. But if you were in shorts and a tank top, you would probably get a lot of stares, especially if you're walking through the market or something like that. So it's noticeable just more in the way that there's a line that you shouldn't really be crossing when it comes to how you're dressing or behaving. You know, similarly, in some of the research that I had done before going, you know, in areas like Kendwa, where it's more resorty and stuff like that, you're more comfortable being on the beach in your bathing suit. And it's fine because it's all tourists and it's accepted. But if you were to go kind of more off the beaten path to a different area, again, you'd have to kind of just make sure that you were in the right place or at the right beach to be able to be in a bathing suit. So yeah, that was just kind of more of the research that I had done and what it felt like just being in Stonetown as well.
Was there anything else you did at the actual resort? Any highlights?
I did a dive. I did two dives. I did a two tank, and Max came and did snorkeling. He's not a diver. Zanzibar is known for its diving, not particularly near Kendwa, more on the other side of the island. So there's like a 3 hour boat ride you can take to the other side of the island, do the really nice dive sites. I did not want to do 6 hours on a boat. So I did the ones that are more just like offshore from Kendwa. They're nice dive sites. They probably rank like middle of the pack for me as far as Southeast Asia, which is top, 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 versus Caribbean, which was I would say like on par kind of with what Zanzibar was like. But the pricing was pretty good. It was $100 US for a two tank dive, which isn't bad. It was nice. Like the reef life was nice. There's definitely signs of overfishing though. So because I don't think they really have as strong marine protections in that particular area. On the other side of the island, there's a whole marine conservation area. So I think it's a lot better. But in this area, you could kind of see the signs of that.
Anything else you did?
No, that was pretty much it. We did a lot of beach lounging and then just hung out on the beach with the Italians and listened to the Italian music every day. And the games, the beach games that they would play. And we didn't do an all-inclusive package there. So there was an option. We had just booked like the room at the resort. So we didn't do an all-inclusive thing there because they had a really awesome restaurant on the property. And all of the resorts have the buffet area where if you do get the all-inclusive, you can go, or the restaurant area. But the restaurant was very well priced and the food was really good and there was a really good variety. So we just ate there every day and it was fine. Like there wasn't any issues. Our package came with the buffet breakfast. So we went into the main hall for breakfast, but everything else we just had the restaurant. And really funny story about this resort. We're in the restaurant, we're paying at the cash, and there's a picture of the Aga Khan wearing his Order of Canada pin. And Max, again, who is recognizing a picture of the Aga Khan in his younger years, by the way, also, like not a recent picture. Right away is like, is that the Aga Khan and wearing an Order of Canada pin? And the lady behind the cash goes, oh yeah, we're Canadian and they were Indian from like, and her parents were from Ethiopia. And again, going back in time, there used to be a ton of Indian people that lived in Ethiopia and Central Africa. And then there were a bunch of revolutions and there was this mass exodus and a lot of them moved to Canada. And so this woman's parents, they had moved to Canada really briefly and then decided that they didn't really like it there. And so they decided to buy this beach resort in Zanzibar instead. And start up a business in Zanzibar. And again, at the time, it was kind of a little bit rockier because they weren't really welcome there. But they just really wanted to go back to Africa. And so they bought this beach resort. And then the parents were getting kind of older. And so the daughter and her husband moved from Toronto and decided to now run this beach resort. And it had
My
been,
God.
I think, about a year that they had been there running the beach resort full time.
That's crazy. We stayed at a hostel in Italy once. It was kind of like we were in a private room in a hostel, and we go to the front desk, and the guy is like straight up speaking like English like us. And I'm like, "Where are you from?" And he's like, "Toronto." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Do you own this place?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "My wife's Italian, but we bought this place together and then we moved back to Italy." And I'm like, "What are the chances?" And
Yeah.
yeah, Canadians are everywhere. Is there anything else about this trip that you haven't mentioned that you want to mention?
Obviously, overall, you had said it earlier, it's a spectacular trip and it's so adventurous because my trip would not be the same as anyone else doing that trip. There's so many different things that can happen, things that you can see, and maybe the Zanzibar part would be pretty much the same, but the safari part itself is just so unique, and everyone that I've talked to that has done it has had such a different experience. So it's very cool and it's a really unique experience. I 100% recognize that it's not the most affordable thing for everyone, but I will say that it shouldn't be considered just a thing that you do when you're retired. Like, certainly being younger people there, we were able to handle the long, bumpy card rides and we were down with the adventure a little bit more. I feel like if I was in my 60s, I would maybe not be in that state of mind, but different stages of life. And yeah, I think it's a very cool part of the world. I think even I would consider going to places like Rwanda because there's other trips you can do in there to see the big gorillas. And there was a lot that was kind of opened up in my mind of options to see in that part of the world that I were really not on my radar.
What's the next destination at the top of your bucket list?
Oh, okay, it's been on my list for a very, very long time, but I really do want to go back to Southeast Asia and go to the Philippines. Then it was one country that I didn't get to do, and I definitely want to do that. Otherwise, we have friends that just moved to Australia. I've never been to Australia, so that one's kind of floating up the radar because there's an opportunity to go visit. And again, it was never a place that I necessarily had high on my list, but that might become an upcoming trip. We'll see.
All right, Francesca, we're going to do a quick game I call the rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to say the first thing that comes to your mind. No overthinking. Are you ready?
Okay.
What's your favorite country you've ever visited?
Overthinking. Japan.
What's the most underrated destination you've been to?
Morocco.
What's the best meal you had on this trip?
Ooh, we did a beachside dinner and we had lobster and a whole bunch of seafood and it was really good. And it was only $30.
I like cheap, delicious
Cheap and
dinners.
delicious.
What's one travel destination you'd go back to in a heartbeat?
Oh, Thailand or Vietnam for sure. Also Croatia. We went to Croatia and then left and said we need to go back. So that's, yeah, up there.
I already know the answer to this question. And I put this in completely not even thinking the context. What's your most chaotic travel day of all time?
May 30th, 2025.
Oh my gosh. What's the most emotional travel moment you've ever had?
Oh my gosh. Well, also probably May 30th, 2025. Because I almost cried when that person said that Max could not board the plane. I was very overwhelmed, emotionally overwhelmed by the balloon safari. That was very cool. And then I had a bit of an emotional experience when we had stopped in a small village and just seeing kind of the poverty that was in that particular village was very emotional. And there were some small children that were kind of waving to me in the truck. And I was wearing sunglasses, but I did shed a tear because I was quite overwhelmed by that. Yeah, because as much as, all of the safari part of things is great and the beach resorts are great, it is a very different way to live. And there's a lot of people that are kind of just getting by. So
Mhm.
that was emotional for sure.
We are going to now do listener questions. We only have 3. What's the difference between visiting the Serengeti versus other parts in Africa to see the animals?
Yeah, I do know that there are a bunch of safari options in South Africa, more kind of in the northern part of the country, if I'm remembering correctly. And, there are a bunch of kind of more treks with the gorillas in Rwanda and in Kenya as well. So the northern part of the Serengeti, when it's in Kenya, is called Masai Mara. And then there's a few other game reserves, which is more what they're called. Even in South Africa, they're called game reserves, but there's more game reserves in Kenya as well, where you can go in and they have more protected wildlife. So, as an example, in Kenya, you can see rhinos because they have a very protected game reserve where you can go see them. Even in Tanzania, there's other smaller parks that you can go to. We just didn't really have the time and we didn't want to do, it would have been like an 8-day safari, which was kind of stretching it for what we wanted to do. So there are other parks. There's Tarangire, I think I'm probably butchering how you say it, but Tarangire. So that's another kind of smaller park that you can go to as well. But there's a lot of different options.
Okay. What's the bathroom situation like during the safari?
I have to say, for a woman, not good. You're not really, first of all, supposed to be like getting out of the vehicle. So in North Serengeti, there was a small airport because the really fancy bougie people, they fly from north to central Serengeti. They don't do the 3-hour drive. That's like if you're spending $20,000, you fly. So there's a little airport. And so thankfully in North Serengeti, whenever I had to go to the washroom, I'd be like, yeah, can we go to the airport? And there was a little set of washrooms there and it was all relatively close. So we were able to kind of just go do a little detour, go to the washroom and then kind of continue on. When we were in Central, it wasn't really like that. So there was the one day where I was like, okay, I really have to pee. What are we going to do about it? And we had to drive for a little while and our guide had to kind of stake out whether there were any animals lurking in the bushes, like any cheetahs or anything, for me to get out and pee behind the truck and then get back in. So I had to, squat on the road and pee and then hope that no other truck would come by also because it's very rare that you're really, really alone. Like some other truck is always going to come. So I was hoping that no one else came. Thankfully, no one did. It was close. There was a vehicle in the distance, and I was like, please don't look too hard. So yeah, it's not great for a woman. Way easier if you can stand and pee.
What are the beaches in Zanzibar like compared to other beaches you've visited in the world?
Ooh, they are really nice, like kind of light sand beaches, very tidal, which was pretty cool to kind of stand there. And there's certain points of the day where you can stand there and the water's just gushing out of the sand and retracting into the ocean. So that was really cool to see. And there's a lot of starfish and stuff that come out as well. It's definitely not as like the azure blue crystal sparkly water that you get in Corsica or in Croatia or places like that. So it's a little bit different than Europe, but it was nice.
Well, thank you, Francesca, for being on Wander every day. I'm going to be honest, I literally never have considered going on an African safari. And after talking to you about this, I'm literally in my mind thinking, how can I pull off going on an African safari? Because it just sounds so unique compared to any other trip I've ever done or even thought about doing in such a positive way. I don't know. It just sounds like a once in a lifetime experience. There's a reason why when we're kids, we all talk about how we want to go on a safari. Like, we want to go on a safari, but why do so few people do it? I hope that people listen to this podcast and get just as inspired as I've become. And we have more people who are willing to venture to Tanzania and maybe do a similar adventure. So thank you for sharing all your information with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It is truly the Lion King. The intro of the Lion King is Serengeti. But
Well,
yes, I very much enjoyed reliving my memories of this trip because it was definitely once in a lifetime. So it's been fun.
and that's a wrap on today's episode. A huge thanks to Francesca for sharing her incredible stories from Tanzania and Zanzibar. If this inspired you to add East Africa to your bucket list, I hope you're already dreaming of lion safaris, turquoise waters, and spice markets. Don't forget to follow Wander Every Day on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your local podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram or TikTok at wander_every_day. Leave a review or share this episode with your travel buddy, especially the one that's always talked about going on an African safari. Until next time, friends, happy wandering.